So good afternoon, everyone. How's the Josh today? Very low. I know you guys have had a good lunch. Great weather in Bangalore. But let me start with this, right? I was talking to, if you've noticed, the four guys sitting here are all from Hyderabad. In case you, I must ask Uday. Where is Uday? Yeah, was this done by design or by choice? Or by chance? Sorry. Huh? By design. Okay, fine. So then, so maybe we can start with, start with a few digs at Bangalore, considering that we are from Hyderabad. Uday, I hope you're listening. So I've heard of flight of startups from Hyderabad to Bangalore, and Ramesh and I were talking.
The flight makes it look bad. It's more Bangalore's importing startups from
Hyderabad. And now you're also importing panelists. Huh? Itna shortage ho gaya kya?
Not panelists, whole panel.
Whole panel actually. Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so maybe a quick round of introductions, right? So let me start with the entrepreneur first.
Yes.
Okay. So please welcome Bala. Bala is a very interesting entrepreneur in a sense that is the typical, engineering. I am Ahmedabad, and then started off our food about 6 years ago, and he's an agri-tech entrepreneur, right? So basically, essentially trying to build something where farm gate level you create, processing village level entrepreneurs, right? So welcome, Bala.
Thank you.
And let me go to the gentleman on my left. Okay, I'll save the last
For the best.
For the best. Yeah. So we have Ramesh Loganathan. Ramesh is many parts rolled into one, right? So he's a professor. He's an actual PhD, and then
actual professor.
Actual professor, right? And no then he's also an investor. He's partner at Succeed Ventures, and he also runs one of India's most successful incubators and accelerators at Triple. So that's Ramesh for you. And then the gentleman on my immediate right is Rama Iyer, and Rama again, man of many parts, technocrat, entrepreneur, and now he started a new VC fund. He's part of a new VC fund called Silver Needle, of which I'm sure all of you will hear a lot more of, right? But in some ways, we're all connected because we are from Hyderabad, which incidentally, for those of you who don't know, Hyderabad is the greatest city in the world, right? And the only thing Bangalore has, which Hyderabad doesn't have, is good weather,
and bad traffic.
Yeah. So as I tell people who come to Hyderabad from other cities, so if you live in Bangalore, the traffic will kill you. If you live in Delhi, the air will choke you, right? But Hyderabad, you don't have those challenges, right? So folks, I'm trying to wake you guys up because all of you looks like all of you had good lunch and are feeling a little, sleepy. So that was the whole idea. Okay, so let's get to the theme. So I'm going to start with a question for you, right? Innovation means many things to many people. Right? There are different definitions of innovations, right? So what we'll try and do here is get your perspective. So you wear multiple hats. You're an investor, you're an academician, you also run a incubator, right? And Rama, you now are an investor. You run a large corporates innovation program, and you're also have been actively involved in building an innovation ecosystem, right? And of course, Bala as well. So let's start with trying to outline what does innovation mean to you. Let's agree on trying to get a baseline done for what does innovation mean to you.
Sure. Thanks, MSR. So, to me, I mean, many people, there is art, there's innovation, and there's startup. If you look at, right, the art part of it is just something, it doesn't have to have any purpose. But art is where you have something creative. It can even be tech, can be some very interactive, something in the metaverse, or could be anything. It doesn't have to have any purpose. Anything interesting creatively done is art. And innovation, in my definition, is something that's a purposeful art. Right? It could be technology, could be like a business innovation, could be anything. It's a very creatively thought out solution using any kind of it could, like I said, need not be necessarily tech or research based. Could be just even a process innovation or a business model innovation, but something creatively done, creatively different, with a market purpose or utility purpose. Some can be social, not necessarily revenue purpose, but a utility purpose, social or commercial. That's innovation for me.
Brilliant. There's actually a nice quote which I'll come back to. But let me go back to Rama first and tell us what's your definition of innovation.
Innovation. Hi everyone, good to be here. For me, innovation is like anything done better. From a corporate angle, at least, and I'll build on what Ramesh said, that it doesn't need to be tech. It doesn't need to be commercial. It can be social, utilitarian, etc. For me, it is, and this we do it with corporates, especially at GMR today that we are doing. How can you do things better? Whatever functions you are finance, you are admin, you are like security guy, whatever. And today there is a lot of baggage that people think innovation means it has to be digital, it has to be tech, it has to be space, it has to be rocket science, all of that, right? So we try to kind of break it down and keep it simple, that innovation is like maybe you're already doing it. You just don't know. You're just not called it that, but it gives a more structured approach of how you can make it like on a daily basis. More people can see here, but it is a little bit of a two-sided thing where the moment you create structure in the interest of creating like, a larger institutional thing, you in a way like mess up the entire thing of the whole idea innovation piece, and people then fall out of people who are real ideators. They get really like repelled with anything which is like, structured, and then a lot of people just use the process ka baggage, and then it is out of the window. So in fact, what you wanted to help innovation do more actually gets destroyed. So I don't know where I went with that, but essentially innovation is like, you don't need too much structure. Let it happen naturally, and you try to be in the background when you are trying to be a innovation champion or evangelist.
Thanks, Rama. So let me go to Bala, right? Bala, you are building a business in a space where, pretty much, for the last thousands of millennia, right? We've been doing farming, right? Because without farming, you don't get food, and without food, you find it hard to survive. So coming at wearing a practitioner's lens, right? Particularly in a sector where, close to even today, close to about 40% of our population is involved in agriculture in some form or the other, right? What is your definition of innovation?
Yeah. Am I audible? Yeah. So for me, coming from entrepreneur background, so innovation means providing a solution that benefits all the stakeholders. So if there is a concept called brainstorming, so where if you have to provide a solution, we write down all the solutions, all the possibilities, but we never understand which is workable or not. An entrepreneur thinks from the angle of execution, where that is feasible for less cost and easy to implement and easy to scale up. If you can provide these kind of possibilities in your solution, that innovation is complete. So for an entrepreneur, it is benefiting all the stakeholders by providing a solution.
Okay. So I think just to go back, to build on some points which are in common. There's this professor called Bill Ole from MIT, right? And he put down a set of equations for defining innovation.
Yeah. Interesting.
Right? So for example, he said innovation is equal to idea into commercialization, which is what he said, right? He said idea into purpose, right? Idea into process, because unless you have a mechanism by which you can actually convert whatever you are doing into reality, it will just remain an idea. You must have a mechanism to figure out how to do that. So I think that's a great start. So I'll now flip the order around. Okay, so I'll start with you, Rama, and then we'll do this in anti-clockwise fashion. So people talk about incremental innovation and people talk about disruptive innovation, right? So from your lens, right, as somebody who's leading a large innovation program for India's largest airport operator, right? What do you see as the difference between incremental and disruptive innovation?
Sure. Um, we today are looking at a whole bunch of innovations, right? Like setting up center of excellence for robotics, both soft and hard. We're looking at AR, VR, digital twin. And any of that, the COE has a contours of things which is programmatic, but some are like, incremental in that way where we are just moving the needle a little bit to show that there is a conclusion and an outcome so that people don't get too much worried that what are you doing? Nothing is coming out to answer that question. And at the same time, there is a parallel thread running where we want to do something which is long term. Sometime, I mean, you can call disruptive from where we started or where we are, but for some other, it's a solved problem. But it just depends on the maturity of organization. Where we are in terms of we are challenged at digitization part tech adoption. But today we have kicked off a whole bunch of threads. It includes digitization, innovation. It includes potentially a fund that will invest into startups and things like that. So we are trying both incremental and disruptive. Disruptive not necessarily from a tech, but as an organization, what we have tried or never thought before, but we have kickstart on that. So that will have a much more longer timeline. Some may have a shorter timeline. So for us, it is incremental and disruptive is more in the sense of one timeline based, one the quantum of investment, and one the ability for the corporates to think out something which was typically been crazy from their standpoint. So that's how I would kind of define incremental and what is disruptive for us.
Bala, going back to what do you see in your space, for example? What do you see as incremental and what do you see as truly disruptive?
So we need both the solutions because some sectors need a complete set of thinking. So when Steve Jobs introduced the Mac computer, earlier it was a big box which we cannot carry, but they introduced a small computer which we can carry. So that is disruptive. But in agriculture, we can't give a farmer. So when the knowledge of the farmer, education of the farmer is at ground level, so you can't bring a sophisticated computer and give him to operate it. So here agriculture needs incremental solution. We have to take them from one step to the other, step by step. So it depends on the sector where we are operating, and especially in agriculture, the incremental innovation is required. We can't feed the farmer with a lot of data, a lot of analytics, and ask them to sow something which they can't digest. So we need to take them step by step. If they are growing some kind of crop, maybe something related to that, we have to educate and take them further.
Thank you, Ramesh. And I know you'll come up with some really far out ideas, but yeah.
Not really, but see, incremental, see, the two types, I mean, look at innovation, right? One is the outcome of the innovation, what it does, and one is the way it is done, what is being created. Now, sometimes what is being created can be very significant in terms of the whether it's the approach or the thinking or the research or technology, whatever it is, might be very significant, but it might result only in an incremental outcome in the market, right? So, and the other case where it's only incremental innovation itself, the new thinking itself is only incremental, resulting in an incremental outcome. So the third one is where it's very disruptive thinking with disruptive outcome. Radical, and both sides radical. Now, I think incremental, we often look at it more from the market outcome standpoint, which is important. When you talk about innovation, if it doesn't mean something to the end-use community, then it doesn't mean much. So incremental can be both ways. And sometimes it's incremental in thinking and incremental in outcome. Oftentimes, not often, sometimes, oftentimes it is that, but sometimes relatively rare though, very significant different approach, but resulting in only an incremental outcome. Like sometimes it is hard to make that, if you take the AI world, increasing the accuracy requires fundamentally different thinking. Like today, if you're looking at something as simple as face recognition, you might get it right 90-92% of the time. To take it from 92 to 94, it's not just marginally, you need some fundamentally different ways of processing images to be able to move that 2%. So from a market standpoint, it's incremental, but it's very fundamental when you look at the innovation itself. So many such areas, but we need to differentiate these two because sometimes we tend to discount the innovation because the outcome is incremental. But very hard sometimes to get that incremental outcome. And other times it's probably not so hard.
Also, to add to that, the third thing that I'll add is one is for each of them, what they define incremental disruption is different, and it is good for them in terms of the idea stage and an outcome. But for somebody else outside, it may be like, par for course. It may not really be disruptive, but it's okay. Like, don't do a bucket benchmark. Just think about where you are in your maturity. And for you, these are like, really disruptive in terms of either thinking, either tech adoption or outcomes. And then there is the third thing, market centering thing. Okay, is it disruptive enough? So that's like, a little bit of an outer context.
So I think if you can solve Bangalore's traffic, that would be disruptive. The solutions which are
So
being done to solve.
there are some impossible innovations. Bangalore traffic comes in that category.
Okay. Yeah, I notice all the Bangaloreans are sitting and lapping all of this up.
No, they are tired from the traffic of travel, so they are just taking it easy.
Okay, so let's spend a couple of minutes, Ramesh, and I'll start with you. Right? Given all the work you do in deep tech and all of that, and also the fact that you're also actively involved even in many social causes and so on. So let's say if I were to ask you, let's say what are the 3-4 things which you see in the near term, which are ripe for, particularly from a Indian context, which are ripe for significant innovation at scale. If you were to ask the young, tell the young people here, listen, why don't you focus on solving these 4 problems, right? And think about solving them at a different, innovative way, which could impact at scale. What would those be?
I'm not sure if I can think of it too broadly though, but it's some areas that's come up in recent times where may not necessarily have a commercial angle. I think healthcare is one place where it's always been an area where a lot of money has been going in. But I think there's, especially if you look at some of the emerging technologies, both on the sciences side as well as on tech like AI and such. I think we are working on something at IIT, trying to bring quality healthcare at the doorstep. Like an ASHA worker I didn't know until recently, until we started working on this more closely the last 2 years, that ASHA workers are social workers. I always thought they were with some medical training. They are social workers. And like, now somebody like that who has absolutely no medical background, maybe even a school dropout, just literate and not educated necessarily, can they offer quality medical care at the doorstep in a village? No, that's possible. It's powered by technology. Like a lot of the diagnostics, just by either sound or the image or touch, without any invasive diagnostics, algorithms can determine many different conditions. And then if you have AI to diagnose, and then you have AI to kind of also prescribe what to do, and then have a telemed doctor in the end to actually write the prescription. You can do this at scale. You can't send a doctor to every village, every house. But a social worker can go to every house. Somebody calls saying like, I'm not well, or my kid is not well. If the person goes to her or the social worker goes to the house, you get good quality care to the doorstep. That's possible today. We're working with large NGOs, working with the government, working with a few other institutions. We're trying to say, how can we collaborate? This is very social. There's very hard to have this in a commercial. ASHA workers could never have been a commercial program. It is social. So at this point, we're not worried. If somebody funds it, it's good. If it doesn't, we'll figure it out. But we said, let's build the tech first. Now, that's one. So many others. So healthcare is one area where I think a lot of disruptions are possible. And like, we're talking about technologies where, like, for instance, just doing a culture for a bacteria, right? What in the using science, the way it was been traditionally done in labs, you just take 24 hours, 48 hours, because it has to be culture to identify certain types of bacteria. Now there are work happening where using light and different types of light, can you identify immediately? Because the bacteria is in the blood. Just that, like, trying to find it through culture takes 48 hours. But if you can find it some other way, so there are things like that. So I think all areas of healthcare, there is a lot of disruption possible, socially or commercially. There's one area for sure. I mean, if I had to pick one segment, I think healthcare is a segment where a lot is possible. Earlier, you had to be a very large pharmaceutical drug research company or such to do it. Now, if you look at on the technology side, you don't have to have all those resources. I mean, you can't go discover a new molecule by yourself. That's a 7-year, 10-year process and needs a lot of money, lead research labs and all that. But if you're trying to do it with tech, you don't need any of those. Just understanding the problem and coming with the tech, a small tech team can create a lot of good stuff. I think that's where I think the next wave, serious opportunities commercially and socially.
Rama?
Sure. One, I think I'll just add to what Ramesh said on the health side. I think we still don't have the UPI moment, what UPI has done for fintech. Similarly, we have been talking about health stack, but we haven't got to the point where there is either a network fabric which solves, or there are APIs exposed that I don't need to worry about whose data, how, what is it available. So that's one part. The second part, I think, which is huge, and we're talking outside with our friends in NASCOM about data and AI, right? AI is a huge thing, but we need to kind of get to the point where what Kaggle has done today in terms of providing data set for people to kind of go knock yourself, create models, submit for competitions and solve issues, right? We need to do it at scale. And as ecosystem, I think we need to do a lot more. One of the things that T-Hub has been doing and under MSR's leadership, or we have also thought in the past, is to set up a HPC supercomputer grid, which is on-prem, so that startups and everybody can use that. Don't need to worry about cost or a cloud-based thing, which kind of chokes as the data throughput increases. So some of that things in terms of democratizing compute, democratizing data, making it available, a marketplace of sort, and incubator ecosystem focused on that will be a good thing. I know that IIT has bunch of things going on there, but we haven't got to the point where there's one place where I don't need to worry. As a startup, if I'm working on data science or AI, I know this is the place where I get everything. Compute, data, network, resource, subject matter expertise, mentoring, and potentially people who will also invest into that, whatever I'm trying to build. So I think that's a huge space. And I think if India has to take a lead over places like China, then I think we need to get that act right.
One thing I'll add to that, correct, not add. Everything, I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, Kaggle for India problems. And if you can bring everything in one place. Only thing I would beg to differ is like HPC is not required these days. I mean, it's better to go and use all influence possible with somebody like Amazon or Google or Microsoft and get them to give, because HPCs go absolutely no time. It's too much investment. Other than that, everything else is very relevant, and bringing it in one place is good. There have been some initiatives, but it's not happening. There have been some initiatives around creating fintech sandboxes, which is not just a test setup, which they already have, but go beyond that to bring all aspects that Rama mentioned. There have been some talks about doing similar things for defense, but they're not moving fast enough. I think if you can take a collective effort and accelerate that, I think even if you do it for certain domains only to begin with, I think it'll nurture and accelerate a lot of innovation.
Yeah, I think the cloud thing, absolutely. I think that's the first logical thing, where if it's smaller initiative for a startup, probably that works. But if the data increases, you need to do it more and more, the cost of that then goes up. So for a corporate, you're okay. You can still solve that problem. And even corporate today, when they get to hundreds and thousands of dollars per month per check, they're trying to offload some of those data throughput onto on-prem so that they don't need to keep paying for some of the things that you can run. So I think there is still a play for having a HPC type of a setup powered by NVIDIA, which is GPU, and still do that because it's a one-time cost. And somebody like T-Hub, DST, all of the other guys come together can put it. So we don't need to think about the cloud-based dependency at all, which is one, latency and delay, and then there is a cost element.
Sure. Let's go back to Agri, right? And Bala, if I were to say, if I were to ask you, just like Ramesh talked so eloquently about healthcare and Rama added to that, what are the spaces which are ripe for disruption in the Agri context? What huge problems, like man trying to land on the moon some 50 years or 60 years ago, what are the big challenges in front of Agri and open for disruption?
So in Agri, there are thousands of problems. So we need to provide solution to these problems. So the available startups in India, maybe 2000 odd. So we are only scratching the surface of the Agri problems. For example, transplanting the sapling, paddy sapling. Farmer hardly gets around 15,000 rupees profit per acre. But they spend 3,000 rupees only for transplanting. That is about 20%. And cotton harvesting. The market price of cotton today for farmer is about 50 rupees per kg. But farmer pays around 10 rupees for harvesting. They pay to the labor. That is about 20% of the entire cost of the cotton. If we can provide a solution for this, for harvesting the cotton, that itself is a $1 billion company. But till now, no one has done. And transplanting the saplings, that is multi-billion dollar project. But no one came with a small solution which can be operated by a layman also. All the transplanters available today, they are very high capex and cannot be accessed by a small time farmer. And even if they bring that, they pay again 4,000 rupees. That is 1,000 rupees more than manual transplantation. So like this, if you take in each step, there is a $1 billion company in agriculture. I can give 1,000 ideas, but there are no people who are actually thinking on these lines. Maybe we can solve one problem in our lifetime, but there are thousands of problems to be, they are waiting for the young minds to come into agriculture and provide solutions.
Yeah, thanks, Bala. That was, I mean, you really opened up. So usually most of these tend to be very tech type solutions, but you brought a very different perspective to a serious challenge. Okay, so let's now switch tracks a little bit. So we talked about innovation, we talked about spaces which can be disrupted, etc. Let's talk a little bit about what it takes to build a innovation ecosystem, right? So I'll start with you again, Ramesh. So given your gray hair, so on, and having worked for so long.
I'm 26 years old.
Yes, of course.
I'm very early graying. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So let's say from your perspective as somebody who's been in the space for so long, what does it take to build a world-class innovation ecosystem?
See, I think it happens. I believe it happens. Maybe sometimes it happens very naturally without anybody making an effort to build, right? And I think Bangalore is a good example. I don't think anybody made an effort to build the ecosystem. The IT industry was large here. It was a lot of MNCs were already here. Very few people know that like Hyderabad has almost exact same mix and numbers as Bangalore these days. Little smaller, 2/3, but the kind of companies, nature of work and all that's no different. But then the point is Bangalore had that from the early 80s. And of course the weather and beer were two big attraction. So a lot of people coming back, been there, done that, tech industry coming back, would naturally come back to Bangalore. In the 80s and 90s, it was steeped in reality. Today, it's steeped in illusion because Hyderabad is as good. Not many people know that. We have our own microbreweries. Very few people know that today's weather is Hyderabad weather 6 months in a year. Nobody knows it. Everybody thinks Hyderabad is hot. So now, I think Bangalore happened more because there was a convergence of people. And like all the early startups happened here, the early exits happened here, and they fueled that whole ecosystem. I don't think anybody made an effort to build. So Bangalore is an example of an ecosystem that can naturally grow without anybody making an effort to build it. Hyderabad, on the other side, is where there's a lot of amplification happening through the ecosystem efforts. Whether it is because Hyderabad, again, not many people know that there are about 26 research incubators, research institutions, non-academic research institutions between Agri, CSIR, and defense. And like that fuels a lot of research IP coming out. And or of course, all the academic institutions or the incubators and such. There's an active effort to align all of these and amplify. So I think these are two examples of how ecosystems can evolve. One is Bangalore, where it happened more organically just because of a convergence. And once you hit the knee, everybody wants to come here, right? Now, then you don't have to do anything. All the good people, in spite of the traffic, in spite of the infra and everything, people come here because you want to be around others. Though I keep telling people, especially in Hyderabad, look, if you're getting a meeting with a good VC or a mentor is hard. Once you get the meeting, in Bangalore, it will take you 2 hours. From Hyderabad, it will take you 2.5 hours. You have a flight to add. It's like, so you don't have to be in the city to get those meetings. It's a perception that if you're around, you will get. So, but anyway, I see these are two examples of how ecosystems can evolve. More organically, the way Bangalore happened, nobody actually making an effort. And Hyderabad, where it's happening because there's a very active effort. So in what might have taken 20 years probably will happen in 5-10 years in Hyderabad because of all that efforts. At least I think two examples of how ecosystems evolve.
Sure. So I just want to build on what Ramesh said. So Rama, so if you want to delayer, what are the key elements of an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and for the benefit of our young audience who's still awake?
Sure.
So
I mean, I would have said a one-liner like, build a T-hub and ecosystem builds around it, but that's one way to go about it. I think the other way was one, the natural evolution that Bangalore happened in spite of, like, all the other things not falling in place. I think it's different city, different states, different thing fits them in terms of a template, either a planned thing or something happens. For Bangalore, all of the things, and I'll also add, there's a lot of research organizations. There is the DRDO, ISRO, all of that, right? A lot of talent pool, lot of things, and different places have created their own small ecosystem, whether it is the EC, the Kormangla, the Indranagar, all of that, right? So everything is mushrooming in its own thing, which is both good and bad. So people now do only local things. They don't even come to events which are off or don't come and meet, which has become a challenge. In Hyderabad, it just all things is in the new place, which is high tech Gachibowli. Everything happens there, all of that. And now we have a swanky new T hub. So that is like the largest ecosystem in the world in terms of space, in terms of what it. So it allows for a natural marketplace to be created, and anybody wants to meet, they kind of now hang out there, right? So that's one way. So I think for newer cities and states, they have started now aping that model of a marketplace thing, because Bangalore is not going to happen to them. There is just only that many startups, that many colleges or thing. So you at least need one place where you say, oh, this is my startup space where I'll do events, I'll get people, I'll do all of that. So I think for different things suits, but there can only be like that many Bangalore in a country, or maybe just one, right? So for others, they need to put effort and create and carve out ecosystem for themselves. And that, for lack of better thing, you need an anchor space for that, around which things can revolve, right? And then you let it kind of grow from there.
So Bala, I'll just build on what these two gentlemen here said. So Agri is about what, 16% of our GDP, right? Overall. So approximately about close to $500 billion
Yes.
type of thing. But you said only 2,000 startups, right? For an industry which is actually, when you think about it, not too far short of what overall IT is from standpoint, 2,000 is too less, right? So what is it that is preventing a flourishing startup ecosystem in the agri space? So first of all, what is it that's required to build an ecosystem? And second is, where do you see the gaps in building a ecosystem for agri?
So to develop the startup ecosystem, so first we need to have entrepreneurial mindset. So this has to be developed right from the academic level. The moment you get into the university. So the idea is there is a education loan right after your graduation. So everyone is forced to do some job, so that you have to pay back the education loan. So when this entrepreneurial mindset is there for any student, that sits on top of your head. So there will not be any proper encouragement. So when we decide to develop this entrepreneurial mindset, so there are certain programs that are designed. If someone wants to become entrepreneur right after the education, so there are some scholarships given in the ecosystem. So once we develop this, the students will be willing to start the startups and solve the problems. After that, so once they come out of the college, the basic thing that is required is the practical knowledge. Generally, while being a student, we all think of solutions which are not workable. So when that practical knowledge, when you start gaining that, then the proper solutions come out. So in agriculture, that is the problem, because most of the time we don't spend in the rural areas. We don't spend time understanding the real problems. So most of the agri startups which are doing this, they are all in the marketplace segment, where they simply want to convert the connect the farmer and buyer and sell the material.
Farm to fork, basically.
Yes. But when you practically go to the field and understand, as I told you, cotton harvesting is the biggest problem the Indian cotton farmers are facing. It is a $1 billion company if you can find out some small solution for harvesting this. So when this practical knowledge is not there, not many startups come.
I would have expected this agri incubators, they do a little bit more justice to that space, right, in terms of exposure. For us, at least at TUP, we have worked with ICRISAT more closely. So agri startups, we say, why don't you help? Because we don't know the space. So that's how we have done. I don't know, Ramesh, like you must have seen some. Why is it that Agri is always
So
been
it's
this
very
challenge?
hard, I think, to what Bala said. Many people with an Agri background are not starting up. People with tech background are starting up, and they've been mostly urban, semi-urban. There's no grassroots understanding of the problem. So often, I meet mostly very early stage startups when I meet. I've been meeting Agri startups for at least like 8-10 years now. We ran a couple of Agri cohorts along with Manage in 2017-18. And so most common thing I see in Agri startups is like 8 out of 10 are techies trying to do something. You managed to crack that. Your understanding of the grassroots reality is extremely good. Most of them don't, right? They think if just because their grandfather was farming, they understand farming. Or they went to a village for 2 weeks, they understand farming, right? I mean, some of these problems, unless you immerse yourself, you don't. So it takes a lot of effort. I don't see many of them putting that effort to understand. That's the first problem. Some put that effort to understand and then they crack the initial problem from a solution standpoint, problem solution fit. The ones I have seen early stages that often struggle, they don't understand how to scale it. It works in pilots. And then when they scale, because it's all very low margin, if you go work with one farmer, the unit economics are very, very low. So you need to have very good models to be able to scale. These are two things that I have come across as the most common reasons. One, their understanding is slow, so even the problem solution fit itself is poor. If they've cracked that, then which again is an understanding and creative thinking. How do you crack it at scale?
Yeah. See, for example, life science also similar, right? It's not very flamboyant, not very sexy. People don't understand, only very some people. But at least Bayrak seems to have done something in terms of dispersing, mentoring. So is there a Bayrak equivalent for Agri? Like, is there a nodal
No,
agency that's
no,
helping?
no.
No? Okay.
So I actually want to build on what both of you have said here. So let's say we have 105 unicorns as of yesterday. Many of these are, basically what I call imitation is the best form of flattery models, right? You're just copying what somebody else has done in the West, bringing it down here. So my next question I'll start with you, Rama, right? What will it take for us to build an ecosystem? We can produce the next, let's say the next Google or the next Microsoft, right? So we have, let's say a Zoho or a Freshworks, but fundamentally what they're doing is, taking a model which is working in the enterprise and dumbing it down for the small and medium business segment. But what is preventing us? And I'm also throwing the question open to folks from Bangalore specifically, right? Who obviously think that they are the best things in sliced bread, but they're really not doing anything in it. So I want to provoke some thought here.
Sure.
What will it take for us to produce? And I'm not saying necessarily in tech to be, we are not producing a Tesla here. We are not doing Google or a Microsoft, anybody doing really cutting edge work, right? Or even in the life sciences space.
Right.
What will it take for us to produce? We've had, I think, some 3 or 4 Nobel Prize winners, right? That's it.
Yeah.
Right? So what's stopping us from building out the next Google or a Tesla?
Sure. So I think to me, it's a journey, right? I want to look at it as half full rather than half like empty. You gave a bit of the answer in terms of Freshworks, Zoho. We never had product companies before of that size scale attacking global market listed. So I think we have kind of traveled some distance with that. So kudos to them. We also have the likes of like Bhavesh who are trying to set up manufacturing for EV, trying to go against large players, automobile, both India and globally. So that also is a great step. Obviously, there is teething challenges and people like to see the not so great side. But I think people are now ready to challenge, whether even if it's like Google or Tesla. I was talking to a friend in Bangalore actually. So he's trying to look at a search engine which is better than Google, right? And I'm like, okay, tell me more. And he seemed to have a lot of wherewithal with that. So there are things but we just think that it is too big and it is Google, so we should not compete, or let's just look at something else. So I think that belief system is increasing when we see more examples. And today we don't seem to have that. The culture is a very broad word, so let me just use that, of really not worrying about the failure part, like being little impractical. Like in Western Americans, they are mavericks, right? That's the right word for it. Really going bonkers, taking a shot, and it's okay. So be it. What if they are Microsoft? What if they are Google? So I don't think we have enough of people who question that, but I think the younger lot are becoming that. So partly you need to kind of be not so smart so that you just, you know what, I'm going to compete against Google. That's not a bad start. At least you are now starting to think, right? And it's okay if you fail. I think that's how it will happen. So to me, it is a little bit of a glass half filled. We have started in that direction. We need more people who are crazy mavericks and a good mix of smartness. I think we should probably get there. We should have an equivalent of that, like, in the next decade.
You're an optimist.
I've come across few people like that. Now there are two types of people that challenge, like say the incumbent status quo, like say Google. Now one that says, look, they're not doing. I actually met somebody 2 days back, right? Who said like, I'm building a recommendation engine. Okay, 8 tons of recommendation. We have tons of recommendation engines going through some 4 or 5 generational shifts in the last 20 years. Why? The current engines don't work. Who told you it doesn't work? I've talked to a few companies, retail companies, and they said it doesn't work. Who in the companies? Somebody, some second, third rank person. Now, and so you're convinced it doesn't work and you're going to build. Now, why do you think your engine will be better? I'm going to use data. I said, every recommendation engine uses data these days. Like I'm going to use AI. I mean, half of them use ML these days, even if they're not ML based. Now, it is steeped. Now, yes, there can be somebody who will come and disrupt that space, can come up with a recommendation engine that just beats everybody hollow. Because they don't work. I mean, when we go to Netflix or Amazon, half the recommendations, it's like not half, 80-90% is something you don't even want to see. So they're miserably failing. But problem is there. Just because I always say problem doesn't become the solution. That's only an opportunity. Now, the right people means somebody trying to crack a search. I don't know about your friend. I hope he's coming to the right background. I'm saying somebody trying to crack such a problem, a recommendation engine or a search engine problem, has to be steeped in some very strong academic, intellectual basis. That is a necessary starting point. Then they fire, belly, all that comes afterwards. But without that, like it's very wishful thinking. I mean, assuming that look, there's a problem, so that's my startup.
I'm going to go to Bala, right? So I think Ramesh touched on this point that how do you, this whole thing between academia and industry. So there's a problem which has to be solved. The problem obviously has to be solved by an entrepreneur or a certain industry segment, and academic will provide, some basis and all of that. Why is that not really working, for example, in Agri? I know we have PL 480 and a bunch of other things, right? But why is it not happening? What is stopping tighter collaboration in building a, innovation-rich ecosystem between industry, academia, government, funding, and so on?
Yeah. So most of it. Yeah, most of the solutions given by the agri startups and also people coming out of the agri universities, I find them they're not grounded. So most of it comes from other sectors, what they are doing. So let us try to implement this here. So this is coming because of we don't have that incremental problem solving bent in our thought process. So when the world is here, see, we want to solve the problem by going somewhere else. So this knowledge is not given, is not transferred from the academic world to the practical world. So because of this, that bridge between the academia and
Industry.
the practical entrepreneurs, that's not happening.
Okay, so I think we have about 3 minutes. Just to make sure the audience is awake, does the audience have any questions for us?
Actually, I have one question here. Infrastructure is there fully in India. For example, in Bangalore itself, we have so many aerospace companies like Aeronautical Development Establishment, Aeronautical Development Authority, NAL, and on top of it, the biggest white elephant, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, and GTRE, government, gas turbine research establishment. We are not able to produce state-of-the-art aircraft till now, even though HAL was started in 1944. And for Agri also, we have Indian Institute of Horticultural Research and University of Agricultural Sciences, but they are still not able to do whatever is necessary for the innovations. What is lacking?
Political hot potato question. Any members of the media here? apart from business world? Okay. So I'll reserve my comment. Ramesh will go first.
No, I think it is, we have become an extremely service kind of mindset economy, right? The aspirations for like 95, 98, 99% of the families, parents, graduates, students is to get a job. Now, when you get a job like an HL, yes, HL could have created an LCA. I mean, much earlier and actually flown it, but we are still struggling to get it inducted into the forces. But to our credit, nation's credit, we do have an LCA, right? Which has come out completely ground up, though it is maybe 10, 15, 20 years too late. But I think that services culture, that creative things to go build something is not there in our culture. I mean, like, I saw this, I mean, our children are naturally very creative. Our system kills that creativity, right? By the time they come to high school, it's more about academics. By the time they come to 9th and 10th board exams, 11th and 12th is all about entrance ranks. So we kill the creativity. And with our education system, like I'm sure in the same public sector economy or definitely in the private sector, in the startup, more recently the startup world, I'm sure a lot more fantastic startups can come. We have the intellectual ability to do that. We kill creativity. I think that's the single biggest problem. In spite of all other shortcomings, if that drive is there, I'm sure people are breaking free, quitting jobs, not taking up jobs and doing startups. With some creativity, they can do much better startups. Even the same 5, 10, 20,000 startups in the country can do a lot more very interesting stuff if we have more creativity, which we are stifling and killing. I feel that's the biggest inhibitor for us.
One last question. I think we have.
She had raised her hand first.
Sir, what we learned in our MBA is like innovate or perish. So right now, what we are having is like innovate and perish. The innovation which came in Bangalore, it has destroyed the beauty of Bangalore. And number 2 question is like, I need
So
a
come to Hyderabad.
Yes, please come to Hyderabad.
answer. Other one in terms of agriculture, we are seeing so many hospitals are coming up because we see that palak, spinach, it is grown in gitti. Gitti means that small bricks. So our ancestors have eaten those? No, sir, they haven't. It's really a food for thought. And then India is a IT, we say capital. We should keep on, it's a journey. It's a journey. But every journey has a destination. So what is a destination? And in Agri, I heard that England are coming to India and grabbing all the lands and they are buying, and then they're going to impart their technology. So as US, Europe, I personally went there and did a study on agriculture because even I'm also very much interested. So they just put efforts in R&D, but entire thing, they don't allow their land to be captured by Indians. So it's really, thank you.
To understand the question, so what I understand is you are trying to tell that the food that we are eating is completely adulterated. So that is true. Because let me tell you one example. The chili powder. So we process the chili powder at our farmer. And when we want to sell it, the hotler says, I want the chili powder per kg 60 rupees. So when the raw material cost itself is 140 rupees, how can you give the chili powder for 60? So they say, yes, it is available in the market. So to compete that pricing, so what we have to do? The mindset of the consumer, they always want the lesser price. When you go to the market, so we bargain. So if the farmer, if the selling price is, let us say 50, so you want that to be sold at 40 rupees. When the price of onion increases, you make all hue and cry and bring down the government. So the consumer mindset is always you want the food to be given for less price. So what is the option that is left? You have to adulterate. Otherwise, you can't provide chili powder for 60 rupees. The 95% of the chili powder samples that we have, they are adulterated. Because it is produced industrially by taking 20-30% of actual chili and by mixing the sawdust and the color pigments. Because here, who is to blame? It is the consumer. Because the consumer always wants food product to be given for less price. We bargain. And when the price increases, we bring down the government. So it's not the system that needs to be changed. It is the consumer mindset that needs to be changed.
So I think, Uday, are we out of time? Sorry? Out of time? Okay. So thanks, Ramesh, Rama.
Thank you.